Good morning and welcome to the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises. Please silence all electronic devices. Chair, we're ready to begin.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a meeting of the Subcommittee of Zoning and Franchises. I am Councilmember Kevin Riley, Chair of the Subcommittee. This morning, I am joined by Councilmember Lewis, Botcher, Carr, Showman, and Abreu. We're also joined remotely by Moya. Today, we will hold one vote on a motion to file an application. We also been joined by Minority Leader Joseph Borelli. Today, we will hold one vote on a motion to file an application that has been withdrawn by the applicant and then hold hearings for 5 proposals. The first public hearing is a proposal by the administration to streamline the land use regulation that apply to the South Richmond on Staten Island. We will then hear a proposal for a large residential project in the Bronx, followed by hearings for applications in Staten Island, Queens, and finally Brooklyn. Before we begin, I recognize the subcommittee counsel to review the hearing procedures.
Thank you, Chair. I'm William Vidal, counsel to the subcommittee. This meeting is being held in hybrid format. Members of the public who wish to testify may testify in person or via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to testify remotely may register by visiting the New York City Council website at www.council.nyc.gov/landuse. To sign up, or for those of you here in the chambers, please see one of the sergeant-at-arms to prepare and submit a speaker card. Members of the public may also view a live stream broadcast of this meeting at the council's website. When you're called to testify before the subcommittee, if you are joining us remotely, you will remain muted until recognized by the chair or myself to speak. When you're recognized, your microphone will be unmuted. Please take a moment to check your device and confirm that your mic is on before you begin speaking. We will limit public testimony to 2 minutes per witness. If you have additional testimony you would like the subcommittee to consider, or if you have written testimony you would like to submit instead of appearing before the subcommittee, please email it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number and/or project name in the subject line of your email. We request that witnesses joining us remotely remain in the meeting until excused by the chair, as council members may have questions. Chair Riley will now continue with today's agenda items.
Thank you, Council. Beginning with the vote, I now note that the Council is in receipt of a written statement from the applicant that the application for LUs 253 and 254 in Councilmember Yeager's district in Brooklyn has been withdrawn. Therefore, pursuant to Council Rule 11.60B, LUs 253 and 254 relating to the 1233 57th Street rezoning proposal is void, and I make a motion to file the items to remove from the Council's calendar. I now call for a vote to file LUs 253 and 254 relating to the 1233 57th Street rezoning proposal. Council, please call the roll.
Chair Riley,
Aye.
Chair Lewis,
Aye.
Councilmember Botcher,
Aye.
Councilmember Carr,
Aye.
Councilmember Moya,
Vote aye.
We have 5 votes in the affirmative, and this this motion is passed.
Oh, Council, we will leave the vote open for a few minutes, okay?
Yes, Chair.
All right, thank you. I will now open the first public hearing on preconsidered LUs relating to the South Richmond zoning relief proposal in Minority Leader Borelli's district in Staten Island. This proposal by the administration to streamline the regulations applicable in the special South Richmond district that is mapped over southern Staten Island. The special district was created in the 1970s in response to the rapid development of the undeveloped land in the South Shore of Staten Island. The goals of the special district were to balance development with the preservation of natural features. The regulations of this special district are out of date, and the current proposal is an effort by the administration to streamline the regulations and make them more effective balance between creating much needed housing and preserving South Shore natural environment. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you may register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/landuse. And once again, for anyone with us in person, please see one of the sergeants to prepare and submit a speaker's card. If you prefer to submit written testimony, you can always do so by emailing it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Minority Leader, you would like to give? I'm going to give the floor to Minority Leader Borelli to give his remarks.
Thank you, Chair Riley, and thank you to the members of the public and to City Planning for showing up to today's hearing. I want to thank them for their hard work on this for the last couple of years. And I want to just highlight that this has been genuinely a collaborative process. Just to give a history of this issue, we had approached the last administration with similar problems, talking about the similar burdens that Staten Island property owners had to overcome, even for the most trivial and basic things that any homeowner, any property owner would have to do. And unfortunately, the last administration decided to make this more about placing even more burdens and more environmental regulations on South Shore homeowners. And it was not a successful endeavor, and it was not met with public support. To be clear, most of my constituents who moved to this area of the South Shore of Staten Island did so because of the tree canopy, because of the open space available to them, because of the system of parkland that we have, because of the general greenery that you see all throughout my district. I'm probably the only council member who, on their block, just on my block, I can go bass fishing and probably access 5 or 6 miles of biking and hiking trails. So we do live in a very unique part of the city, and I, again, am thankful that City Planning has acknowledged that and sought ways to protect that while not making average middle-class folks have to go out of their way, and more importantly, into their pockets for some of the most mundane and normal things that homeowners do. I do have some concerns over the tree preservation plan that's included in here. I believe we should be trying to preserve some of the bigger, older, more beautiful trees, but I think the new formula just punishes all tree removal. I think the incentive was to preserve the big ones while at the same time allowing people to develop parts of their property that might have smaller trees. So that's a concern. And I'd love to work more on removing or altering some of the designated open space that just hasn't panned out the way it was originally intended to, and now creates some undue burdens on additional housing and additional uses for certain sites. But again, this is night and day compared to about 4 years ago when the last administration came with a proposal, and it was met by angry pitchforks and protest. So again, thank you, guys.
Thank you, Minority Leader Borelli. Council, I see we have Councilmember Abreu. Can we just open up the vote for him real quick?
Yes, Chair. Councilmember Abreu.
Aye.
Do you vote on the motion? Thank you.
Council, we're going to close out the voting portion.
The vote is closed, and for the record, we have 6 votes in the affirmative for the motion, which is passed.
Thank you, Council. Council, can you please call the first panel for this item?
The first panel consists of George Todorovic and Catherine Iannato.
Council, please administer the affirmation.
Please raise your right hand and state your name for the record.
Testing. George Todorovich.
Catherine Iannato.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, before you begin, I would just ask, can you read and state your name and organization for the record? You may begin.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Riley and council members. My name is George Todorovich, and I'm the Deputy Director of our Staten Island Borough Office at the Department of City Planning. I'm joined today by our Borough Director, Katie Ferrara Iannato, and we are both very excited to be presenting this proposal for South Richmond zoning relief, which Minority Leader Borelli mentioned, which is now coming towards the end of a very successful public referral process. This proposal was unanimously approved by Staten Island Community Board 3 earlier in May, received a favorable recommendation from Staten Island Borough President Vito Fossella in June, and the City Planning Commission unanimously approved the application last month on August 9th. This proposal has a long history, as Councilmember Borelli stated, and has been through many different iterations, so I also just want to quickly acknowledge the entire working group that was a part of this proposal, including members of the Community Board and Borough President's Office, as well as Minority Leader Borelli's office and City Council Land Use. Each member of the working group contributed endless amounts of analysis and feedback over the past several years, which was crucial to the consensus which was ultimately achieved by all. That said, we're very excited to be presenting this proposal today. This proposal is a text amendment to update zoning regulations in Community Board 3 of Staten Island. On slide 2, you'll see that we have 3 items we'd like to discuss. A brief overview of the special district, then a quick outline of the existing zoning, just so everybody's familiar with the existing regulations, and we'll finish with the main unique issues in South Richmond that are unique to this district. So on slide 3, we have a map of the Special South Richmond Development District. This district was created in 1975 in response to the rapid development boom which occurred after the opening of the Verrazano Bridge 9 years prior. The goals of this special district aim to balance development with natural feature preservation. And as you can see on the map, this special district includes dozens of neighborhoods and is approximately 1/3 of the borough. A significant portion of properties in the district are classified as low-density land uses, specifically 1- and 2-family homes. 41% of the district is 1- and 2-family homes. So moving on to slide 4, this initiative originally started because our borough office in Staten Island, we've received feedback from the community over the past few decades. They asked us some questions such as, why is the approval process so complex and burdensome for small projects? Or why individual homeowners need to spend extra time and money for city planning commission approvals that would simply be filed with the Department of Buildings elsewhere in the borough? And conversely, requesting that the city focus resources and review on larger sites to help protect sensitive sites that have more natural features. So on the next slide, after these questions were asked of us, we created a working group. As you can see in the timeline at the bottom, the study kicked off in the spring of 2015 and has solicited feedback from a wide array of stakeholders. There have been over a dozen working group meetings over the past 8 years, as you can see in the timeline. It's included many stakeholders, some of which we noted earlier. And now, although some of the elements of the proposal have changed from the prior administration, and since it has changed since we went on pause in the spring of 2021 due to the pandemic, the core goals of the proposal still remain the same. So on the next slide, you will see the 3 goals that were established by the working group members that are in response to the 3 main questions that we got over the few decades on the previous slide. These goals strive to simplify the approval process by creating homeowner-friendly rules for small properties. 2, establish greater predictability for natural feature preservation. And 3, improve regulations on larger sites that have a greater impact on the public realm. So this next section, on the next slide, will quickly go over the existing and proposed zoning structure. So on slide 8, you'll see that the current South Richmond zoning text requires our office to review virtually every single residential lot in this special district. As you can see on the chart on the right, 89% of all of the land use applications we review are within 3 of our oldest special districts, and 57% are in South Richmond alone. The other ones are in the Natural District, in Community Board 2, in Councilmember Carr's district, and in Community Board 1 in the Hillsides District, in Councilmember Hanks's district. And 67% of the majority in the red box are reviewed for 1- and 2-family homes. And one of the most striking statistics is that on average, 44%, or almost half of the applications we review, are simply for the subdivision of land or public school seats, more of which will be discussed in 1 second. And lastly, in the bottom, you can see there's also some authorizations which have a little bit more review, and those are specific for tree removal, topographic modification, and group parking facilities or parking lots. So on slide 9, at a very high level, here are some of the ways this proposal attempts to simplify the approval process, and all those numbers you saw on the last slide, establish predictability for preservation to still maintain the goals established in 1975, and improve regulations for larger sites, which the community has been asking us to do for a while. As you can see in the top row, an as-of-right framework would be established for small projects. Small subdivisions of land, 1 acre in size or lower, would be filed directly with Department of Buildings, just like DOB does for other zoning law subdivisions across the entire city. The proposal would remove outdated zoning rules which have zero or low applicability today, more of which will be discussed on the next slide. And lastly, tree removal, topographic modifications on small sites, also under 1 acre in size for small homeowners, would be reviewed by DOB exactly the same way DOB already enforces those rules today. So then in the bottom row, discretionary review would be required for most sites greater than 1 acre. And regulations related to designated open space, which is a pretty unique element of South Richmond, would remain unchanged, and we'd continue to review those on any site regardless of size, except we would update the text maps to remove some portions of DOS and improve legibility. So on the next slide, you'll see we have one last section. We just want to highlight some unique elements to South Richmond that some of the council members may not be aware of. So there, on the next slide, you'll see 8 main buckets or categories that we've broken this down into. The first one is something called special areas D, F, and K. To put it plainly, these rules no longer apply. These areas have been acquired by the Parks Department. They've been acquired by DEC. They have new protections. And another unique element in box 1 are park streets for curb cuts and street rules. But these rules from 1975 have been made redundant since 1975. And now the city of New York, across the entire city, now has rules for trees and curb cuts. The second box, subdivisions and school seats, that striking statistic of 44% for 1 and 2 family homes is very onerous. And this not only costs a burden for homeowners, but it's unnecessary cost and time delay for housing production overall. The third box is related to tree preservation. Each property in Staten Island needs 1 tree credit per 1,000 square feet of lot area. We are going to retain that rule to preserve the tree canopy, as Minority Leader Borelli noted earlier. But over the years, we've realized some issues with this rule. We've realized that the rules have become more punitive rather than preventative without improving the health or longevity of the trees. The fourth box, designated open space, is unique to South Richmond. We're not changing the overall structure or regulatory structure of DOS, but we're doing some administrative cleanups. The text maps and the zoning are pixelated. They contain isolated portions which no longer apply, so we're updating that, which has been 50 years in the making. Fifth, this proposal does not step on the state's toes to regulate DEC wetlands. We heard that loud and clear during the public referral process from the previous administration. However, the goals of South Richmond aim to, quote unquote, avoid the destruction of irreplaceable resources such as lakes, ponds, and watercourses. And the zoning text currently does not acknowledge that. So what we're simply doing is correcting this misalignment and acknowledging the existence of state DEC wetlands without creating more rules for them. In the sixth category, there are a handful of streets designated as arterial streets that have curb cut and building location rules. These rules need to be modernized, and they will allow for as-of-right curb cuts if DOT and DOB approve them. And the building location on these arterials are currently restrictive. They do not provide a flexible, pedestrian-friendly Main Street. Seventh, any parking lot with more than 30 parking spaces today needs review, any parking lot. But our office has realized that even a parking lot under 1 acre in size that has more than 30 parking spaces, it's pretty formulaic. There's already fire code, maneuverability, landscaping standards. There's not much review needed. It's pretty cookie cutter. But on larger sites, over 1 acre, that have very low parking requirements, those don't need review if there's only 20 to 30 parking spaces. And lastly, on bucket 8, any site greater than 1 acre in size will be classified as a plan review site in the future. Any development of a newly constructed building would require CPC review, but we also acknowledge that even on sites over 1 acre, there might be some existing buildings requesting a small alteration that could be as of right and go to DOB. So this proposal sets up a logical framework for sites over 1 acre. So on this second to last slide, in summary, the text amendment would remove old zoning regulations with low or no applicability, remove the certification process for school seats and subdivisions, give homeowners flexibility to replant trees without needing 13 votes from the commission to remove a tree, clean up the DOS text maps to remove conflicts in the built environment, acknowledge the existence of DEC wetlands, modify the structure for arterials to allow curb cuts if DOT and DOB approve them, shift the authorization for parking lots from any site with 30 parking spaces to any site that's greater than 1 acre, And overall, if there's one thing to take away from this proposal, we are simply shifting community board and commission review to sites that are over 1 acre that have a greater impact on the public realm. So this last slide in closing, we just want to acknowledge all the working group members that have been involved over the past 8 years. Leadership at Community Board 3 acknowledged the collaborative effort of this proposal. Minority Leader Borelli's office, who represents the entirety of this district, stated that this proposal strikes a proper balance between property rights and the preservation of natural features. The Borough President, Vito Fossella, is supportive of these clear and concise rules to help minimize costs for residents. And Mayor Adams has stated that this is an update that is needed to end complicated rules, to get stuff done, and align with the city's BLAST initiative. So that is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. Just have a couple of questions. I'm going to yield my time to Minority Leader Borelli. Can you discuss why you selected an acre as the largest site for the proposed controls on natural habitats?
That was looked at because of two things. One was environmental sensitivity. At 1 acre, that's when we realized that an ecosystem thrives and has connectivity to other systems. And secondly, more practically, any warehouse that has 30,000 square feet of building size, that only results in 30 parking spaces. And a lot of the big warehouses that we see just come under that threshold and they don't have review. And the community board and other members of the working group have realized that a lot of these warehouses that are 30,000 square feet and then have a 10,000 square foot parking lot with 30 cars just are built as of right without any review for traffic, for the destruction of trees. And an acre is 43,560 square feet, so it's close to 40,000.
Okay.
So that's kind of why we chose an acre.
So there was no consideration made to include smaller sites?
No, and if a zoning lot does subdivide, if a property owner wants to, sell their home and move somewhere else in the city or to New Jersey or a different state, and they subdivide their property, that would result in about 4 homes, and per zoning lot rules, that wouldn't breach 1 acre. So that's why the threshold was kind of for larger commercial manufacturing sites, but still maintaining an as-of-right pathway for homeowners to do simple improvements or sell their property more easily.
Okay. And lastly, I see that this process started like in spring
Yes.
2015.
Yes.
It's now 2023. Could you just enlighten me on why this took so long and what is the normal time for a process like this?
Well, our director could speak a little bit more to like our traditional timelines at the Department of City Planning, but specifically for this office, I have been working at the Staten Island office since 2017, when this initiative initially started 2 years prior. And to be honest, we did step on the community's toes a little bit. We had a lot of people involved. If you could say there was too many cooks in the kitchen. There was a lot of complex rules and analysis that went into it, all for good reasons. But at the end of the day, we kind of lost sight of the main goals. So, fortunately or unfortunately, the pandemic allowed us to reset after a pause. And we looked back at our notes from 2015 and 16 and 17 and just went forward with a proposal that just met the working group's basic goals that were intended at the beginning.
And I'll just add that part of the complexity of those first few years, oops, am I not on? I'm just not close, thanks. Just add that part of the complexity of the initiative in that first few years was an attempt to have a similar level of simplification and overhaul to the island's other 2 special districts. So you saw on that slide that like 90% of our applications come from one of 3 special districts. In the beginning, part of the complexity was that we were working all across the island to address not only Special South Richmond District, but also Hillsides and Special Natural Area District, which takes up a majority of the rest of the land area of the island. So trying to address those 3 large and fairly unique areas at the same time resulted in that kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, and trying to come completely to shared goals, we realized was not an efficient approach and an effective approach for each individual unique special district. So, this is lesson learned. We started here in South Richmond. It remains our goal to address the needs in the other special districts as well.
Thank you so much. I'm going to yield my time, Minority Leader Borelli.
Just a few brief questions. I actually would like to hear the public feedback more than my own voice, since we had spent so much time working on this. But the chart on the tree restitution, you said it's to encourage preservation and not be punitive. I just think the formula that we're given now and we're seeing is actually still punitive. So if the goal really is to preserve some of the larger trees that provide the most canopy, why would we then increase the penalties on the removal of smaller trees when at some point the structure or the building or the required parking, whatever it is, have to go somewhere?
Right. No, that's a good question, and the chart,
Slide 22.
yes, it's in the appendix. The chart shows the new system. So in the future, a 42-inch tree, the biggest one on this chart, today it's only worth 10 credits. In the future, a property owner would get 13 credits for it. In the future, a property owner can remove a tree with a building permit from DOB. They no longer have to come to city planning and get 13 votes to remove a tree in the backyard. So that is the improvement, and that is the proposal. We could keep the tree credit system as it is today, but if somebody had a 42-inch caliper tree today on their site, it's only worth 10 credits. And let's say they needed 11, and they removed another tree that was worth 1, they would then need to plant another tree. But in the future, if we go with this new system, and we say that same 10-inch tree is then worth 13, and they still have 11, then they already have the satisfied amount. So that's what the system does. The system doesn't add a penalty. It just provides the credit that is already required. Because every property in South Richmond, regardless of its size, today it needs 1 tree credit per 1,000 square feet, and in the future it'll need. We're not changing that.
Thank you for
formula.
actually clarifying that, because
Yeah.
I had been reading that a totally different
Okay.
way for
Okay.
a period of time. Just next question on designated open space.
Yes.
The properties that you've selected to remove or amend the designation, how did you pick those lots, and what will be the process going forward if there is some type of discrepancy over whether a lot should be DOS or not?
So we looked at the maps, and first of all, they're pixelated. I mean, joking aside, they look like papyrus. They need to be updated, and that's an easy administrative correction. But then in terms of removing the regulatory burden on some properties, we looked at isolated portions. In the appendix, you'll see that over the past 50 years, the DEP Blue Belt system, which is very successful in the South Shore, has been created. And as that was created, and as streets were open since 1975, that made this piecemeal, chopped up portions of DOS, which we think should be removed. So the proposal looks at those and removes those. In addition to those, there are some that may be part of a larger system, but we used mapping technologies that weren't available in 1975. We used GIS and AutoCAD to then identify buildings that were built pre-1975 that had this DOS imposed upon them, maybe in an error. So in order for a home that's built in the 1930s or 40s to make an expansion of a sunroom or something in the backyard, they can't have DOS on it, or else they need city planning approval for this new sunroom, which we think is pretty onerous. So we looked at all buildings pre-75 and modified the boundary so that it was further in the rear yard. And in some instances, we removed it entirely, but if it was connected to a parks property that was in the rear yard, we simply gave them what we called a usable rear yard so that they can then put up a pool or a cabana or something in their rear yard.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm sorry. What would be the mechanism then for a property owner to amend it? Is it possible? Is it still burdensome?
Yes. So if a property owner still has DOS on their property, they would need either certification to build something on their property, and they're certifying that the DOS is still being maintained in its natural state. If the DOS is over a majority of the site, say 50%, and they can't build, then they would need to modify the boundaries, and that would be a text amendment, similar to this process, which is onerous. 56 William Avenue was voted on by the city council recently, and that was a small 5,000 square foot lot that had DOS entirely over it. This process removed that. That property owner wanted to go ahead. They wanted to beat this process that we're doing today, so that was their right to do. There are other properties which are waiting, and they're going to be able to take advantage of these rules. But if a property in the future still has DOS, they would have to do that process that 56 William did, get an environmental consultant, get approval from City Planning Commission, get approval from City Council, and that process is about a year to 2 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minority Leader. Councilman McCarr?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow up on the questions the Minority Leader was asking about the caliper requirements. So you mentioned the benefit to the property owner as an applicant if they have larger trees on site, but let's just take the 9-inch, for example, here on the appendix where you're proposing a slight increase, right? So if I'm doing a project that entails removing a 9-inch caliper tree, am I making it harder? Am I giving myself more credits to make up for potentially in the example you were giving? Because maybe I don't have a 42-inch on my property, and because I'm removing a 9-inch, maybe now I have to do a change things in order to conform to the new standard, whereas I might not have had to when the existing scale was established.
Right. I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, if we're giving more credit to existing trees,
Yes.
does then that require more trees to be planted because the
Yes.
credit? That would be the case in your district, Councilmember, in SNAD, and that's an interesting exercise to go through if we do, as our director said, revive those conversations. Because in your district, not only is 1 tree credit required for every 1,000 square feet of lot area, which is just a 1-to-1 ratio, there's another method, and you take whichever is greater, and usually the second one's greater, and that one is 51% of what's already existing. So if a site does have a lot of credits, then that's usually the bigger number. So this, I think that would become maybe a concern or a question in that analysis in the northern district, and that would be something we'd like to analyze more if we do.
And why not in this instance?
The South Richmond district only has the one method for some reason when it was written in 75, and we're just keeping the same rules. 1
see.
tree credit per 1,000 square feet of lot area. It doesn't have the 51%. It doesn't have that second methodology, that second option
Right.
of the 51%.
But there is a chance where, as a result of that square footage formula you just indicated, that somebody could remove a slightly larger tree that today might not trigger them to do a planting and may end up doing so. I think that was the crux of what the Minority Leader's trying to say is that, and I don't think either of us had thought of it from the perspective you raised, right, with the larger caliper trees. But I think that, you know, in a world where we're trying to make things less burdensome for folks, this on the lower end seems to be getting in the way of that goal.
That is a potential scenario.
Yeah.
If I could just respond, the trade-off that we've made, George had mentioned, it will no longer be a city planning commission review.
Right.
To have the right to remove that 1 9-inch tree, should that impact your total lot credits, would be DOB's review.
Okay. Well, I think I share the Minority Leader's concerns about that, something to discuss, and I think generally I'm looking forward to getting into this proposal, not just because it's before us today, but because, as you say, it's a template for future discussions with respect to SNAD and hillsides, and I look forward to those happening. So thank you for your answers, and good to see you both here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilman McCarr. Are there any more council member questions for this panel? There being no more questions for this panel is now excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on South Richmond zoning relief proposal remotely or in person?
Chair Riley, there are no public witnesses who have signed up to speak on this proposal.
Thank you, Council. There being no members of the public who wish to testify on this pre-considered LU related to the South Richmond zoning relief proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. I will now open the second public hearing on pre-considered LUs relating to 1460-1480 Sheridan Boulevard proposal in Chair Salamanca's district in the Bronx. This is a proposal to develop a large residential project along the Bronx River just south of Starlight Park, This rezoning from a manufacturing district, M1-1, to a residential district R7-3 with a commercial overlay C2-4 is projected to create over 900 apartments. The applicant is seeking to develop this project in partnership with the city to create a mixture low and middle income affordable housing. This project, which will be subject to mandatory inclusionary housing, will also be required to provide a publicly accessible waterfront esplanade that will effectively continue the park south along the Harlem River. This rezoning would also involve mapping mandatory inclusionary housing over the rezoned area. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. And once again, for anyone with us in person, please see one of the sergeants to prepare and submit a speaker's card. If you would prefer to submit written testimony, you can always do so by emailing it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Council, can we please call the first panel for this item?
The first panel consists of Ross Moskowitz, Ashley Dukas, and excuse me, sir, is your name Brian Newman or Brian Newman, and Rachel Belsky?
Council,
My apologies. Sorry, so we do not have Rachel Belsky on the panel, but we do have Britt Zuckerman.
Council, can you please administer the affirmation?
Please raise your right hand and state your name for the record.
Ross Moskowitz.
Ashley Dukas.
Brian Newman.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions?
Yes.
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 Thank you so much. Before you begin, for the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, before you begin, I just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Councilmember Riley. My name is Ross Moskowitz, and along with my colleague, we are council and very excited to be here today. You'll be presented also by Brian Newman and Britt Zuckerman, who are architects of the project. We represent the Simone family, the development companies. They are a family-owned and Bronx-headquartered development company and have been visionary leaders in the New York City metropolitan area with a decade-long track record of transforming vacant and underutilized properties into successful real estate developments repurposed for a new generation. Simone has owned the two development sites since 1978, and again, we are thrilled to bring this 100% affordable housing proposal before you today. This project has received positive recommendations from CB9, positive recommendation from Borough President Gibson, in addition to CB9 and Borough President Gibson. And of course, the City Planning Commission on August 23rd approved overwhelmingly. We've met with adjacent community boards 2 and 3, Youth Ministries for Peace and Justice. We have met numerous times with the Bronx River Alliance, and of course have been working directly with the Parks Department. We of course have also continued outreach prior to certification and also with city planning, as these sites were originally part of city planning Southern Boulevard neighborhood study. We also are very appreciative of the support Councilmember Salamanca, his district, have given to us, and we've also received support and letters of support that have been submitted from the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, State Senator Luis Sepulveda, Assemblyman Kenny Burgos, and Congressman Richie Torres. We are appreciative of all the work that's been done to date, and really, this has been a 2.5-year effort, and we're very excited to be here today. And with that, I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Ashley Dukas, who will run you through the presentation, along with Mr. Newman and Ms. Zuckerman. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Next slide, please. Again, Ashley Dukas, Land Use Counsel for the applicant. On the screen is the rezoning area. The northern site is 1460 Sheridan Boulevard, and the southern site is 1480 Sheridan Boulevard. Those are the two sites controlled by Simone Development Companies. There are 3 lots in between that are not controlled by Simone, but part of the rezoning area. Across the street, for some context, are the newer Compass residences, Starlight Park to the north, and all the Starlight new connections. And as most of you know, the Sheridan Expressway has been converted to a boulevard, so we feel as though this is the last piece of the puzzle to this neighborhood. Next slide, please. The actions before you today are a zoning map amendment from an M11 to an R73 with a C24 overlay, and a text amendment, and the only text amendment is to map it mandatory inclusionary housing. There are related waterfront actions that both sites are processing for waterfront certification to build the waterfront public access area. Next slide, please. This is the existing and proposed zoning map. You'll see from the manufacturing to the R73, and you can see the surrounding residential districts. Next slide, please. The proposed actions would result in 100% affordable housing for 1460 Sheridan Boulevard. That'll be one building, approximately 248,000 square feet and 304 dwelling units. And the larger southern site, 1480 Sheridan Boulevard, also 100% affordable housing. That would be two buildings, approximately 660 dwelling units and 540,000 square feet. Next slide, please. Next slide. The applicant has been working with HPD and will be applying to HPD's Mix and Match program for the total 970 units across both sites. On the screen is the preliminary breakdown of the AMI and unit types. 40% of the total number of units will be 50% or below AMI. Next slide.
Thank you, Brian Newman, Newman Design, project architect. What we have here is the site plan of the northernmost site, known as 1460 Sheridan Boulevard. To the top of the page, that would be Plan North. That is Starlight Park, just off the page. To the left, to orient yourself, is Sheridan Boulevard. To the right is the Bronx River. What you can see here at the very top, we've pulled the building back 15 feet to the south, away from Starlight Park, and we've created a public access directly to the park there. You can sort of see the serpentine shape that meanders on the right side along the Bronx River, and then wraps around to the south and then back out to Sheridan Boulevard. That's the public access. That's all publicly accessible space, and that's the shore public walkway. The massing of the building is essentially a tower on a base, pursuant to the R73 waterfront district. It's a 7-story base with a tower that steps from 10, 20, and ultimately 24 stories. The tower itself, you could also see, as we've pulled further south, or southernmost portion of the building, and kept it away from Starlight Park. The massing again steps down towards the Bronx River on the right-hand side, so it's an L shape there, down to 5 stories there. Next slide, please. Here we have our artistic rendering of what the architectural language could look like. It's still a work in progress, but what's important to take away from this slide are the varying materials in the facade, the varying articulation, whether it be punch windows, window wall, rain screen, the undulation of the facade, the varying heights, not only obviously the tower on the base, but even within the base itself, the play with the materiality and the transparency of the parapet line. Very important here is the ground floor, the activation of that ground floor with the commercial space. Just to orient yourself again, the left-hand side would be the north that opens directly onto Starlight Park. The idea here is to have commercial uses that can open directly onto the park and integrate not only the building and the public and vice versa, having it flow back and forth freely.
Excuse me,
Yes.
sorry for the interruption. Is your microphone on?
Turn it that way, is that better?
Yes, and our apologies for the noise. Welcome to New York City.
It's
Apparently
construction,
it's
we're used.
outside our building and we cannot control it.
Is there noise?
Not at all.
So as I was saying, the security is evident here, and again, the activation on that ground floor with not only the commercial use, lighting, obviously it would be dark sky compliant. That sort of leads me into the green aspects of the building. You could start to see here, green roofs are articulated on the lower roofs there. Photovoltaics will also be analyzed for the feasibility, make sure it's efficient for this building. So we'd be in compliant with local law 92 and 94. And then no fossil fuels will be used in this building. It'll be a fully electrified building, so VRFs, ERVs, including domestic hot water. So that would be compliant with local law 97. Obviously, enterprise green communities with New York City overlay would be followed as well. Next slide, please. This is the rear, basically, or the view from the Bronx River. The right-hand side is the Starlight Park, opens up there, and we're quickly seeing that public area wraps around. You can see the articulation of the facades, the glazing, and the interaction of that commercial space on the public facade. And then you can see the stepping down towards the Bronx River, as I mentioned before, to that left-hand side, tower on a base. Next slide, please. Go a little faster. Southernmost portion of the site, 1480. Two buildings on this particular site. We take advantage of this site, the grade change. There's about a 15-foot grade change from Sheridan Boulevard down towards the river. So that allows us to have these similar meandering pathways down to the site. As we get into it a little bit later, between the two buildings, you'll see there's an amphitheater that's incorporated, all fully accessible to the public. It also allows us to incorporate 100-car parking in Building 1, the northern building, on the site here. That access, vehicular access, is directly from Edgewater, and it does not cross over the public access to that amphitheater and the space between the two buildings. What I'd like to reiterate also on this site plan is the space between the buildings is 140 feet, so it's almost double the width of a wide public street, where the narrowest point is 60 feet between the two buildings. Where the amphitheater is, it's approximately 95, and the northern side is approximately 70 feet. All publicly accessible, very wide, in some cases larger than a wide street. Again, tower on a base, 7 stories base, 10, and ultimately 24 stories between the two facades. Next slide, please. And what I'd like to call this is the gateway, if you will. The southern site we'd like to call the gateway to this rezoning. And you can see that sort of earmarked from that facade where we have a solid facade on the side entering in there, and we've earmarked a space for a mural. I really think that'll help announce this from a distance, from the visual corridors, from the prolongation to Jennings Street, from people traveling in a distance. It really helps announce this and draw people into the space. Next slide, please. And this is just same site from the view from the river, looking back, and you start to see the amphitheater between the two, and you can see the stepping down and the activation of the ground floor. Next slide, as I turn it over to Britt, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. So cut off from years of development, our waterfront park is aiming to bring visitors and residents back to the waterfront. These parks will activate the streetscape and the recent improvements along Sheridan Boulevard. Next slide, please. Our waterfront park borrowed from the Serpentine and Oxbow bends of the Bronx River. In our southern site, sweeping pathways help visitors traverse that 15-foot grade change while bringing them from streetscape through a series of overlooks along the water. Decking and circulation paths perform as dams or cut-throughs, and this was inspired by the once plentiful fauna of the North American beaver in the Bronx River. And gracious pathways create an ADA accessible pathway that will provide choice regardless of ability. And there's also moments of pause via a series of fixed seating areas. As Brian had mentioned, there's tiered amphitheater seating that offers views of the Bronx River. This will also act as a gathering space for outdoor classrooms, interdisciplinary discussion, or local performances. And cascades of native plantings are designed for sea level rise and inundation from the river. All planting beds were designed as bioretention basins to further illustrate the beauty in green infrastructure. Next slide, please. As Brian had mentioned, our gateway, so this activated gateway aims to welcome visitors and really draw them towards the river. We'll work with a local artist for the mural, and we'll hope to have trees that create peek and reveal moments, framing while also having a sense of safety with lush plantings. Next slide, please. A series of cantilevered overlooks will give visitors a visual connection to the river. We plan to include educational signage throughout the park, highlighting the native species that we've observed on the site, such as the cormorant, the wood duck, muskrat, or red newt. I'd note that in this rendering, it's seeming that the overlook would be solid, but it'd actually be a perforated metal to allow transparency down to the river. Next slide, please. The plantings are primarily native. Through historic photographs, we were able to determine the history of the site as a promenade, and we noticed that there were weeping willows on the site, so we'd like to include those. We'll also be supplementing this with more sustainable natives. As I had mentioned, the bioswale plantings will capture stormwater runoff and river overflow, and all our paving will be permeable as well. Next slide, please. incredibly vital to the project is this connection to Starlight Park because we're creating this greenway along the river. So we've worked with this Parks Department to create an ADA ramp as well as a long stair to create a space of gathering and help welcome you to Starlight Park. And we've also worked with the Parks Department to maintain operations and function of this space. Next slide, please. So you can start to see this greenway where our goal is to create this green ribbon or this thread along the Bronx River. And we're creating our own identity, but also referencing neighboring green spaces. And you can see the threads start to form. Next slide. And as we zoom out, we hope that our project is the cornerstone of this green park, borrowing off of Starlight Park and Concrete Park. Can we return to slide 1?
That's our presentation. You can let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. I have a few questions. You mentioned that you were filing a separate application for the waterfront esplanade. Can you explain why this application was not filed with the current ones, and what is the status of this other application?
The applications are filed. They're formally filed and paid for in public, and they're being processed. We are responding to City Planning's technical review comments and should be wrapping up the waterfront application shortly.
Okay. And why wasn't it filed together?
Waterfront applications are timely and are near construction level drawings. So I think they were filed on the same day or a week apart, but it just, yeah.
Okay. And how would the time of the application affect the development of this project?
The time of the waterfront application?
Yes.
It should not affect it. While those are being processed and hopefully finalized in the next few months, we'll also be working with DEC and HPD and all the other permits and approvals necessary for construction.
Can you discuss your coordination with the Parks Department and locally community groups as it relates to the public open space being provided and the connection to Starlight Parks? Who will maintain and operate this public open space?
Sure. That connection to Starlight Park that Britt had on the screen, it's currently gated off right now. That portion of the park, we found it really important for connection of the greenway, for safety concerns. We pulled the building back 15 feet. We want that ground floor to be commercial. Brian was talking about activating that to get people to the Shore Public Walkway and to Starlight Park. So we've been working with them for years now to come up with a site plan, and then we will get the necessary permits and a restrictive declaration in place for maintenance of that area.
My final question, can we pull up the slide with the breakdown of units?
That's slide 6.
Slide 6. We have many families in this community in need of safe and affordable housing. The borough president and myself, this has been a concern for me as well. Highlight that this current proposal includes roughly 70% of the units as a studio or 1-bedroom capacity. Realistically, is your team willing to explore increasing the allotment of family-sized units? And realistically, when I ask that, is how many more 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units would you be able to include in this project?
The numbers on the screen are the preliminary analysis of the financials and breakdown under the Mix and Match program. So we are following the Mix and Match program guidelines, but as stated to Borough President Gibson, Simone is willing to work with them and NHPD and have those conversations to increase larger unit sizes.
Thank you, I appreciate that. 1 second. Councilmember Lewis, Chair Lewis has a question.
Thank you, Chair Riley. As Chair Riley mentioned, I also want to advocate for the enhancement on the 3 bedrooms. I know that there is a rubric for the Mix and Match program for HPD, but I'm pretty sure you could negotiate and have that conversation with them. You could feel free to ask us for support. We don't mind doing that as well. My other question in regards to Chair Riley's last question regarding the rubric, do you have the AMIs? So are the current AMIs here, are they conducive with the neighborhood AMIs?
No, these are the HPD AMIs, not the neighborhood AMIs.
So it would be good to know what's the neighborhood AMIs and is it conducive with what is being presented here? My other question is, and I think this is a beautiful project, I wanted to know if there was a possibility in your planning and in your blueprint, have you thought about the inclusion of ferry service?
No, it has not been a conversation.
So that may be another option. I know that I saw the roadway there, but there may be an opportunity there for ferry service. So you may want to think about that as another added incentive for the tenants if they have to go to work in particular parts of the city. So we just wanted to give that. And I think I asked my first question already is regarding the AMIs. All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Riley.
Thank you, Chair Lewis. Being no more questions for this panel, I did like that ferry idea. It's a very unique idea, so something to look at, maybe. But there being no more questions for this applicant panel, I think this is a beautiful project. Really excited to see it come to fruition. You guys are excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on Sheridan Boulevard proposal remotely or in person?
Chair Riley, there is one public witness who has signed up to speak. If you're a member of a public signed up to testify on the proposal, please stand by when you hear your name being called and prepare to speak when the chair says that you may begin. Please also note that all panelists in your group have completed their testimony. If remotely, you will be removed from the meeting as a group, and next group of speakers will be introduced. Once removed, participants may continue to view the live stream broadcast on this hearing on the council website. We will now hear from the person who has signed up to speak, which is Lisa Soren.
Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the sergeant at arms has started the clock.
Starting time.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Riley and Chair Lewis. My name is Lisa Soren. I'm the president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. And I thought it important today to come on here and give our unwavering support for this project for many reasons. Economic development, especially in that area, has become a priority across our borough as we work to develop more commercial corridors and access to greenways. There is no better company to do that than the Simone Group. I say that because, for the record, they are the landlord for us here at the Chamber, but they're also a landlord who provides extreme community support. Their landscaping and care for community, for the areas and what they look like is incredible. And knowing how hard the community has worked to revitalize that river and the surrounding areas, I think that there is no better company to take on a project like this, providing not only housing for us, especially is the commercial properties and what areas and what businesses can go in that area, and along with the access to all the greenway and the fact that there is a company that is all about landscaping and the protection of the environment. So it was important for me to come here and tell you that from experience, we are thrilled at an area that has looked horribly for so many years, has an opportunity to shine in the South Bronx. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thank you so much for what you're doing for our community in the Bronx. You have been a tremendous partner in the Bronx, so your testimony is really taken into consideration. There being no questions for this panel is excused. Council, there's no more individuals who wish to testify from the public.
Let's confirm now. If there are any members of the public who wish to testify regarding the Sheridan Boulevard proposal remotely, please press the raise hand button now, or if in person, please identify yourself to one of the sergeants. The meeting will stand at ease while we check for any newly registered members of the public. If you're unable to testify today, you are able to submit written testimony, and please do so at the following address: land use testimony at council.nyc.gov.
There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on this pre-considered LUs related to the Sheridan Boulevard proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. I will now open the third public hearing on the pre-considered LUs relating to the mapping of a C2-1 commercial overlay within an existing residential district in Minority Leader Borelli's district in Staten Island. This action will allow the conversion of a existing community facility to a commercial use in the Bay Terrace neighborhood of Staten Island. For anyone wishing to testify on these items remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online and may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. And once again, for anyone with us in person, please see one of the sergeants to prepare and submit a speaker's card. If you would prefer to submit written testimony, you can always do so by emailing it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Council, can we please call the first panel for this item?
Yes, Chair Riley. Is anybody here representing 125 Greaves Lane from Adam Rothgrub's?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're online.
Great.
I'd forgotten. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Just 1 second.
Sure.
So the first panel will consist of Adam Rothgrub and no one else. Is that correct, Mr. Rothgrub?
We have our architect available to answer questions if required. Guy Don Antonio.
Yes, I'm here. My name is Gaetano Don Antonio with Rogers Carmichael's office.
Council, please administer the affirmation.
Please raise your right hand and state your name for the record. Do you
Adam
affirm-
Rothkrug?
Gaetano Don Antonio.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Yes, great. This is Adam Rothkrug of Rothkrug Inspector, and you can go to slide 2. I'm here today on behalf of 125 Greaves Lane in connection with an application to extend a C21 commercial overlay over an existing R32 district. The approval will allow the expansion of permitted uses within an existing building from community facility uses to both community facility and commercial uses. No new construction is proposed or will foreseeably be permitted by this proposed proposed rezoning. The property is located in Community District Number 3, Staten Island, has the support of the local community board, borough president, and Councilman Borelli. If you can advance to slide 3. The existing zoning lot is over 1 million square feet in area, consisting of several tax lots developed with a variety of uses that includes the existing Evergreen Shopping Center, approximately 336,000 square feet in area, along with residential development of 386,000 square feet. Slide 5. The rezoning will only affect tax lot 425, which is a trapezoidal shaped parcel with 42,500 square feet of area, developed with an existing one-story community facility building built in 2014. As you can see, when the city rezoned, created this commercial zoning for the shopping center, they left out this irregular, triangular, trapezoidal area. So development on that site was limited to a community facility building, but it primarily has the appearance of a commercial building. Slides 6 and 7. And then you can go to slides 8 and 9. The proposed rezoning will allow the owner to lease space to a wider variety of uses, including retail uses consistent with the rest of the shopping center, which is located within the adjacent commercial overlay, and as noted, will not allow any new construction. Slide 9. That's the existing building, and if you go to slide 10 now. There is residential development to the west of the existing building, but it is well screened with the dense thicket of evergreen trees on both sides of the property, approximately 20 feet high, and there is no record of any issues with the adjacent residential neighborhood. Community Board 3 indicated that they had reached out to this neighborhood to make sure that there were no issues with regard to the operation of this building. Slide 13. The proposed change to commercial uses will generate a small amount of additional required parking, as the existing school does not require any parking, but that will be met on the existing zoning lot, which provides parking for 735 cars, which exceeds the required amount, including the uses that would be permitted by the proposed zoning change. And other than that, as I said, this will not lead to any new development. It will just expand the uses permitted within the existing within the existing building. And as noted, the architect is here to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you so much. Just one question. I recognize that the community board and the borough president approved this application, but did you hear of any concerns from the community about the proposed change during the public review process? If so, what were those concerns?
Yeah, there were absolutely no concerns at all. This is a well-maintained shopping center. The only concern that the community board raised was they want to make sure that the residential community behind this building didn't have any problem, and they did reach out to them. As noted, there's 2 sets of very large trees over 20 feet in height that separate this. And actually, the playground for the daycare is right behind the building, so if there was any impact, it would be more existing now. But that neighborhood had no issues or problems with the operation and or maintenance of the development, and no problem with the zoning change. So community board, I believe, was unanimous in favor.
Thank you. There being no more questions for this applicant panel, this panel is excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on Greaves Lane's proposal remotely or in person?
Chair Riley, at this time, there are no members of the public signed up online to testify, nor here in person. If there is somebody who is unable to testify but would like to submit written testimony, you can do so by submitting your testimony via email to the following address: landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov.
Thank you, Council. There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on this pre-considered LUs relating to the Greaves Lane proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. I will now open the 4th public hearing on pre-considered LUs relating to the 42-18 31st Avenue rezoning proposal in Councilmember Wan's district in Queens. This proposal would upzone a residential district from an existing R5 with an C1-2 overlay zoning district to an R6A residential zoning district with a C1-3 overlay. The applicant is seeking to build a new mixed-use development consisting of a 6-story building with approximately 59 residential units and retail space on the ground floor. The proposal includes mapping mandatory inclusionary housing over the rezoned area, which will require applicant to include affordable housing in the proposed development. For anyone wishing to testify on these items remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/landuse. Once again, for anyone with us in person, please see one of the sergeants to prepare to submit a speaker's card. If you would prefer to submit written testimony, you can always do so by emailing it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Council, can we please call the first panel for this item?
Yes, Chair. The first panel consists of Elise Foladore.
Council, can we please administer the affirmation?
Please raise your right hand and state your name for the record.
Elise Foladere.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions?
I do, thank you.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Elise Foladere from Eric Palatnik, PC. Thank you, I see you already got the next slide. We are seeking a contextual rezoning for a portion of 31st, thank you. portion of 31st Avenue at 42nd and Newtown Road for a zoning map amendment from R5 C12 to an R6A C13, an amendment from an R5 C12 district to an R5 district for the mid-block properties, and amend Appendix F of the zoning resolution to map a mandatory inclusionary housing area. We've received positive feedback from the community board as well as the borough president, Donovan Richards. Next slide. The proposed development site covers the existing Coco La Rev site and adjacent lots on the block front at 31st Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Streets. The surrounding area is predominantly residential with a mix of 5 to 6 story apartment buildings and 2 to 3 story houses. With mixed uses along the wider east-west avenues, the site is close to Broadway and Steinway and well served by public transit. Next slide. The proposed action would facilitate a total of 38,189 square feet, 3.53 FAR, consisting of 30,189 square feet of residential floor area with 35 dwelling units and 8,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space. Approximately 9 of the 35 dwelling units would be affordable. There will be 12 parking spaces and 25 bicycle spaces. Next slide. As you can see, this is a breakdown of the unit distribution. We heard from the community board that they wanted us to try to put in more family-sized units, so 38% of the building will have 2 or 3 family bedrooms to accommodate families of different sizes. Next slide. The owner of this building has experience running a local health club, the Rock Health and Fitness. So the proposed ground floor will be a boutique fitness and wellness studio, which we have seen a need in the community and will be nice for the people that live within the building. Next slide. The roof will have a green roof that will be accessible to all of the residents within the building. Thank you. Next slide. The proposed actions would facilitate a small increase in residential density and would reconfigure the location of commercial uses on a wide street and 3-way intersection located near 2 commercial corridors. The addition of residence, commercial spaces facing 31st Street, and the built form of the proposed development would help shape and activate the irregularly configured intersection. Retail would be focused on 31st Street and removed from the mid-block to concentrate commercial activities along an existing commercial street. The site's location at the nexus of 3 streets creates a unique opportunity to bolster a large intersection with an improved pedestrian landscape by creating a strong street wall and providing commercial space on the ground floor. It will help lengthen the robust retail environment that already exists along 31st Avenue near its intersection with Steinway Street just 3 blocks away. Next slide. As you can see here, our building will be comparable in height to many buildings in the area. These blue ones represent buildings of similar height and size. Next slide. And then we have an appendix. If you have any questions, there are pictures as well as a set of plans if you need to see.
Thank you so much. Just one question. Yeah. Could you describe how the proposed development will include environmental sustainability features as part of its design?
Yeah, so the green roof is that, but it also could accommodate solar potentially, and the building will allow for that as well.
Thank you so much. Chair Lewis?
Thank you, Chair Riley. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to know, I don't know if you want to go to that slide, but the breakdown between market rate and affordable units.
Yeah.
Is there a way to go half and half between the 1-bedroom and the 2-bedroom? Because the numbers are not that far apart. Would you consider?
I think it's something we would consider and take back to the client. It's just because it's a small building, it created really difficulties with, there's not things like 421A and different things like that.
Right.
So it created kind of a difficulty. So
for now, there's no 421A.
For now, yeah.
Right.
But it is a discussion we keep having, and we want to provide more affordable. It's just financial difficulties.
So I think, and you've probably seen this in the news and hear this in conversation, the speaker, the mayor, the governor, trying our best to see how we can enhance affordable units throughout the state and the city. And this is an opportunity to show that you could be in partnership with what we're trying to do. So if it could be considered to go half and half on the 1 bedroom and 2 bedrooms, it's a win for all of us. I had a question about the boutique fitness studio. That's not the only commercial property unit that will be on the first level, right?
Yeah, that'll be it.
It'll
It's
just
only
be that?
8,000 square feet. It's a pretty small space.
All right, and what's the square footage of the green roof?
Can we go to the roof plan? Because I don't know that by heart.
Yeah, it didn't say it on there.
There is, it doesn't say on that, but in the plan set, sorry.
I could always get that later, if you guys could give us
I
that.
can also do that, sorry.
And the council member, is she supporting this project?
We've spoken with their office multiple times, and they seem supportive, yeah. We've spoken with the office, though, multiple times.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I just would like to state, I think you guys should reach out to the office again and speak to the member, just to make sure that she's okay with this project. Does look like a very interesting project. Looking forward to seeing it come to fruition. There being no more questions for this applicant panel, you guys are excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on 31st Avenue rezoning proposal remotely or in person?
Chair Riley, there are approximately one public witness who has signed up to speak. If you are a member of the public signed up to testify on the proposal, please stand by when you hear your name being called and prepare to speak when the chair says that you may begin. We will now hear from the first panel.
Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the Sergeant at Arms has started the clock.
Starting time.
Miss Dora Arsenis, are you able to hear us?
Ms. Dora, if you can hear us, you can begin whenever you're ready.
If you're on a phone, you may have to dial *9.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we
Hi,
can hear
I'm sorry. I wasn't unmuting. How are you guys?
Well,
Great.
thank you.
You may begin.
I mean, I've known Steve Polides for about 20 years. I actually run one of his health clubs. I think a fitness club in that area is what they need. There's nothing around that community. Steve and Larry are really good guys. They know what they're doing. And I actually think that the best interest, what they're doing is the best interest for the community.
Thank you, Ms. Dora. Does that conclude your testimony?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Dora. We really appreciate it. There being no other
Thank
members.
you.
Oh, no problem. There being no other members who wish to testify on preconsidered LUs relating to 31st Avenue rezoning proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. I will now open the 5th public hearing on the preconsidered LUs relating to the 2761 Plum Street, 2761st Plum 2nd Street proposal in Councilmember Vernikoff District in Brooklyn. This is a proposal to rezone a commercial C3 district that is limited, yes, it's that one, Mama, that is limited to marina-related uses to an R3-2 residential district with a C2-3 commercial overlay. The rezoning would allow an existing restaurant to become a conforming use rather than continuing to operate as a legal non-conforming use that requires seeking special permits from the Board of Standards and Appeals on a recurring basis. The rezoning area is located along Shell Bank Creek. For anyone wishing to testify on these items remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/landuse. Once again, for anyone with us in person, please see one of the sergeants to prepare and submit a speaker's card. If you would prefer to submit written testimony, you can always do so by emailing it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Council, can we please call the first panel for this item?
The
The first man will consist of Richard Lobel.
Council, can we please administer the affirmation?
Please raise your right hand and state your name for the record.
Richard Lobel.
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in your answers to all council member questions?
I do.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Riley. Again, Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant in the 2761 Plum 2nd Street rezoning. This has been a largely successful process as we've gone through the land use hearings. Zaliv LLC, which is the applicant here, is proposing a zoning map amendment to rezone the project area from a C3 district to an R32 C23 district. This will facilitate the as-of-right operation of a long-standing Use Group 6 eating and drinking establishment, TGI Fridays, at 2761 Plum Street. We don't intend to pursue any new development. Instead, the applicant is seeking a rezoning to avoid going to BSA for a special permit every 5 years. So this special permit was originally granted by BSA in 1987, and because of the odd nature of the C3 zoning district, you're required to re-up that special permit at BSA every 5 years. So this is time-consuming, costly for the applicant, a waste of city resources. This minor rezoning will allow us to cure that. The R32 zoning district, in addition, is a residential equivalent of the C3 zoning district. So we're not seeking any additional residential development rights here. The applicant would be able to develop the same amount of residential square footage under the proposed rezoning as the existing rezoning. The only real effect of this is to primarily to prevent the applicant from having to go back or prohibit them from having to go back to BSA every 5 years. The C23 overlay also supports local service and retail needs, which is a good thing for the area. And as an indication of the merit of this application, Community Board 15 voted in favor by a vote of 33-1. The Brooklyn Borough President approved it, and City Planning subsequently approved it. I'm just going to run through the slides quickly. The next slide is the zoning map. I think probably what's better than that is to fast forward 2 slides to the area map, which demonstrates several things. Number one, it can go to the colored map. Next map, thank you. So the area map demonstrates that the R32, which is sought here, and the dotted lines within the upper right or the center of the plan, that R32 is already existing to the southwest of the property. There's already R32s also to the northwest of the property. In addition, there's R6 districts in the area and R5 districts, both of which districts can build out to a greater floor area than the R32. So again, really this just involves allowing for the applicant to go about their business and to allow these restaurants to exist without this burdensome BSA process. In addition, there's an added benefit to this, which is that the parking spaces, which now number over 90 spaces, would cease to be required for attended parking and would be self-park. So it's just a benefit of putting a C23 overlay, reducing the parking requirement in that regard. The next slide shows the zoning change map, again with the minor change of the R32, and again we note to the lower left of that portion you can see the existing R32. So we're really extending more of the same. And the remainder of the slides show the commercial enterprise at the site, which is the 2-story Cold Stone Creamery, the 1-story Jordan's Seafood Shack, and then the TGI Fridays, a beloved local institution, which is why the community board was so supportive of the application. The remaining plans show the existing layout of the applicant's site, which is primarily commercial, is entirely commercial use, split between those two different 1- and 2-story type buildings. And that's the end of the proposal, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Just 2 questions. Did the BSA raise any concerns prior to granting the most recent special permit? And if so, what were they?
They did not. The most recent special permit was granted through 2020. So in light of the fact that the applicant was looking at an expiring special permit, they came to city planning and requested a rezoning. But the conditions and terms of the past special permit approvals were not materially changed. They basically have been granting it every 5 years or so.
Given its location adjacent to the waterfront, has the applicant taken any measures to protect their business from potential storm surge from and or sea level rise?
So it's a good question. So we note that the existing structure and development is legal and complies with the BSA special permit. So they haven't been required to do any new measures in terms of storm safety. The building itself is relatively simply built in terms of the nature of the construction. No residential here, so there's really no sensitivity as far as any further storm damage. I would note that in the event that they did seek to build something else at this site, they'd have to go into city planning for a waterfront certification, which would require them to comply with and to improve any storm resiliency measures. But as of now, they're doing fine.
Thank you, Richard. There will be no more questions for this applicant panel. This panel is excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on the Plum Second Street proposal, remotely or in person?
No, Chair Riley, there are no members signed up currently to testify. If there are any members who wish to testify at this time, please press the raise hand button, or if you're here in person, please identify yourself to one of the sergeant at arms. If you're unable to testify today, you can submit testimony, written testimony at land use testimony at council.nyc.gov.
There being no members of the public who wish to testify on this pre-considered LU related to the Plum Second Street proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. That concludes today's business. I would like to thank the members of the public, my colleagues, subcommittee council, land use and other council staff, and the Sergeant at Arms for participating in today's meeting. This meeting is hereby adjourned.